Hey, happy Monday. We are back with another edition of the Ad Podcast and have a super exciting guest for you guys today. Jeff Rosenblum is the co-founder of the Questus agency. He's worked for prestigious clients like American Express, Apple, and Capital One, just to name a few. He's also the producer and one of the director and creatives behind The Naked Brand, which was a documentary very much before its time, I would say, on the kind of state of consumer-led brands that want to have a purpose behind what they're doing. So he was early to that stage, and it's a wonderful film. You can see it on YouTube if you want to check it out. And he's also the author of marketing books like Friction, which was a New York Times seller in the marketing section. Jeff, thanks, man. Really appreciate you coming on the show and excited to jump in.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
So why don't we just do a little bit of a trip down memory lane? You know, you don't have to give me the entire Cliff Notes, but what were some of the formulative roles in your background that led you to start your agency with your co-founder? I already know a little bit of the story, but I'd love to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And then as you kind of jumped in for building your own personal brand around producing films about our industry and writing books, would love just to hear about some of the salient points in your background.
Yeah, that's a funny question because you had the plural in there of roles, and the truth of the matter is, I've had many jobs in my life, like washing dishes and other such crap, but I've only had one actual professional job, and that was enough. We started this agency at 27 years old. We had never stepped foot in an advertising agency. We literally had 2 desks, 1 chair, a stolen laptop, and the last pack of Marlboros that we would ever enjoy. Like, we literally could not afford the second chair. Like, whoever was feeling it at that moment got to use the chair, which mostly meant Jordan because he's my business partner and he's the skilled one. But, you know, the role that we did have, that I had, was actually really interesting. I found myself right place, right time, right idea. And right as the internet came along, I helped pioneer the field of internet research, data, and analytics. So I was one of the very first people in the country who understood how to use the internet to acquire data and figure out what people really want. And I barely graduated high school. I barely graduated college. I'm still this young zit-faced kid. And next thing I know, I've got some of the best clients in the world: Microsoft, Netscape, Sun Microsystem, Levi Strauss, Walt Disney. And they were all asking me to collect this data and explain to them, what do people really want? And I think 2 things were happening at that moment that remain really true right now, which is I've sat down and tried to actually figure it out. Literally hundreds of thousands of quantitative data points, countless hours of qualitative interviews, and never fucking once in the history of all my research did anyone ever say, you know what I want? I want more ads. Right? Or I want better ads, right? They were always saying, look, there's a better way to create some value and help me understand your brand story and help turn me from a prospect into a customer, or maybe even a customer into a brand champion where I'm telling all my friends. So all these companies were hiring me to help understand this story. And at the same time, I kept seeing all these giant holding companies, and all they want to do is create more TV ads, or then take a TV ad and turn it into a 30-second pre-roll on YouTube or some other shit like that. That was point 1. And then point 2 was, I just wanted in on the action. I didn't want to be a researcher. I didn't want to be a data analyst. I wanted to figure out, what does that mean? And then how do I turn it into something? At the same time, my business partner, he's this world-class designer. He was selling paintings to like Johnny Depp and all these famous people. And we just had a crazy idea. Like, let's take my really nerdy shit, this data and research, and take your really cool shit, design, and blend it together. That was, as of yesterday, 26 years ago. And it feels like, just like within the last few months, people are like, holy shit, I got a crazy idea. Like, let's blend data and creativity and put it under one roof. And that's where we started 26 years ago.
I love that. So you talked about the background of your co-founder on the design side. Were you guys very much thinking about the kind of quantitative data approach that you bring to the table and then how people experience the web, such as, user design and things like that. Could you talk a little bit about how your two skill sets manifest each other themselves in the work?
Totally. What we really wanted to do was fulfill upon what I think really a lot of people are calling now a value exchange, where
Mm,
people are not simply just giving up their dollars. That's almost the easy and obvious part of it. They're giving up their time, their attention, their data, their ratings, their reviews, their recommendations. For a lot of people, that stuff is actually more valuable than money. And what they're looking for in exchange is something valuable. Give me content that doesn't simply interrupt my journey, but actually carries me through my journey. Help me understand the big moments and the granular moments. Create content and experiences that sequentially tell your brand story. So you're not just interrupting me over and over and over again with the same exact campaign. Like, and I think the example that always comes to mind for me, and maybe this is why we actually started the agency, is I'm a sports fan, right? So I love watching a
mm,
ball game. Watching a ball game is fucking bananas now, right? It's just
mhm.
like it's ad after ad, interruption after interruption, and they all seem to be using the same playbook, which is how disruptive can I be? How superficial can I be? How creative can I be? You look at the insurance industry alone, like one company's red and one company's yellow and one company's blue, and all of them seem to have farm right in the name. Like, I don't get it. Like, who is sitting there? And by the way, those budgets, it's public information, those budgets are like in the billions of dollars every year. And I'm not saying it doesn't work. There's some really smart people there who recognize that if they spend $1 billion, they can create pretty damn good brands. And all I'm saying is whether you're a giant company with $1 billion budget, or maybe you're a Fortune 1000 with a smaller budget, or a mid cap company, either way, start taking some of those dollars away from that one big campaign that you create as a brand simply because you're ready to create that campaign. And instead, look at the world through the lens of your audience and create content information that's delivered exactly when and where people want it. It seems so rudimentary and so obvious. Like, what? That's your big idea? Is don't interrupt them and annoy them and actually give them what they're looking for? Yeah, man, that's my big idea. But still, if you look at how dollars are spent and you look how brands are built, particularly in the Fortune 1000, where they've got their legacy models, very, very few brands are actually doing it. But if you go into modern environments, whether it's online, or I was just in outside of Boston, and this, like, they're building these new cities that are kind of appearing. You see it in San Francisco, you see it in Boston, they're being built from scratch. And you look at all the retail stores and all those brands, they get it. These are
Mm.
becoming overnight sensations, right? They're capturing market share, they're capturing the headlines, they're capturing heart share at the same time that Fortune 1000s are really struggling and they're losing market share, they're diminishing in value, and some of them are just outright disappearing.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. And you just talked about an important component, which is like the reinvention of retail space, right? We've been hearing about how, malls are on the decline and brick and mortar is on the decline, and e-commerce continues to take a larger percentage of market share. But in addition to the e-commerce section of revenue continuing to grow, we see this emergence of retail footprint, less as like a place where you go in and buy a physical product, but more of like an experience center, a place where people go to maybe check out the different things. And especially when it's a high price point, like you think of a Tesla store or a Peloton store or some of the high end mattress stores, but you're not walking out with a product, on a dolly to your car. You're going there to check out the brand and have an experience. Can you talk about how that is a important component of the types of marketing that you're thinking about, especially as you lead into this idea of like what the new city looks like? I was just at a conference and the creative director of Disney was there. And in Indio, California, they're building a Disney town that will be live in by 2030. So just a lot to pack in there, but curious on your take on kind of the reimagining of retail.
No, it's bananas that you just asked about a mall, because I spent 25 years living in the city. Now I sort of live out in the country and I've bypassed the suburbs with most of my
Hmm.
life, which is where most malls are. So I was just in a mall this past week. I think malls are back. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, the lesson for companies that were trying to compete only in malls 20 years ago was like, hey man, your competition is only a click away. You better start embracing digital. Now every brand is embracing digital. And the same thing is true. Your competition is only a click away. So how do you differentiate? And I think a lot of it is going to come back to retail and malls, and more importantly, the confluence of how these two things interact together, whether it's how well your website works with your retail, your app works with your retail, most importantly, how your data is integrated on the back end. So you're treating everybody on a one-to-one basis, right? When someone walks into your retail location, when they go up on your website, when they're up on their app, you should know something about them, right? That's the positive power of data, and they should not be treated like every other Joe Schmo out there, right? They should have a customized, seamless, one-to-one experience. Now, there's a lot of companies like, hey, man, I'm not going to do a retail location. I'm not going to compete in the mall, and that makes perfect sense. It's not appropriate for every company out there, but I think the lesson is still true, which is how do we identify every granular moment that people have in their journey that they have from prospect to customer and customer to brand champion, and how do we give them a seamless experience with valuable content? Yes, that may happen on your retail location. Yes, it may happen in digital, and there's probably dozens and dozens of touch points in between. The question is, or the solution is, to tell a sequential story that carries people through their journey.
Yeah, I love that. And, when you think about sometimes, if you think about the interruptive advertising of, being out in the wild, it's the outdoor industry, whether you're talking about traditional or digital. And I think about, just on my main thoroughfare here in North County, San Diego, Encinitas Boulevard, we've got, some really beautiful billboard space and some great brands taking advantage of it, Viore and others that are local to this market. But then you also have Sumbum that has their world headquarters right on that same street. And you've got, shops on Encinitas Boulevard that have a retail location, again, talking about it as a community center versus a place to buy things. And that's uninterruptive, right? Like a billboard, I look at it, I'm like, that's an ad. A storefront, no matter how small, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's an experience, especially if the people are cool and they actually know about the product. And when I walk in, they're there to help me instead of sell me something. And I think you were early in talking about Apple and really their transformation and them going into retail. Can you talk a little bit about the difference of how you approach retail, the way that Apple does it, or some of these other brands versus going into a retail location that's full of a bunch of people that don't know anything and aren't very motivated to help you out anyways, even if they did?
Well, see, that last point is so fascinating, right? Because I think we're seeing this. It's very dichotomous, right? There are some stores you go in, and it's like they all read the book Unreasonable Hospitality, right? Which is, side note, if you're listening to the podcast, just don't buy my book. Buy Unreasonable Hospitality. It's such a great book, right? And it seems like there's like a segment of the retail locations that have all read that book, and then there's a segment where the people behind the counter are just angry at the customers, right? And we know exactly how we feel, right? One, we feel great and we want to be not only a customer, but loyal and a champion to the brand. And the other one, we feel like a piece of shit and we want to leave and never come back, right? And I think the real lesson there is that every single moment counts, right? And every single moment is the opportunity to create equity in brands. Like, can we go down that path for a second? Like, what is equity? Like, the people almost treat brands like they're an ambiguous object, right? Like, but they're very tangible. And the bottom line is they hold massive economic value. Some of the brands, the Apples and the Amazons, they're worth like $300 billion. Like, there are companies like Interbrand that will actually value these companies. They just came out with theirs recently, and I'm only taking ballpark estimates. But those values are basically equal to the GDP of major nations like Greece. And I'm not talking about their revenue model. I'm just talking about their logos, like that little smile on Amazon that arrives on the side of your box, because they created cognitive shortcut. There's way too much information out there for anybody to possibly be able to process. There's 500,000 brands around the world the world is truly flat. They're all competing for our time and attention. We've seen the data. We see 5,000 branded messages every single day. It now looks like it's doubling again. It may be up to 10,000 branded messages every day. That's one ballpark every 2 seconds or every 2.7 seconds. Our brain was built to have a cognitive spam filter, right? It was built to block out all that information that we're exposed to. The brain processes 11 million bits. It's exposed to 11 million bits of information every single moment that we're awake. But it only consciously processes 50 out of 11 million. Like you run that numerator and denominator, it's like 0.00000. It's as close to zero as you could possibly get, right? Think about early human beings. They're off in the woods. They're looking for food. The ones that got totally distracted, right? Looking at all the pretty flowers, they got eaten by predators. It's that simple. And the same thing is true right now. If we were to all pause, most people are watching this on YouTube or Spotify or something like that. But if we were to pause, there's a lot of information that we're exposed to. There's cars driving around, maybe the sound of the heating, the air conditioning. You could feel the seat, your seat on your back, right? But the brain filters all that out so it can focus in on the task at hand, right? That's our cognitive spam filter. So the bottom line is this, is how do we break through that cognitive spam filter? Don't create noise. The human brain filters out the noise. Create signals. What are signals? It's everything you've been asking about, Dylan. It's meaningful content, meaningful experiences. Retail breaks through the cognitive spam filter because you're actually creating a valuable experience. The person behind the counter gives you a smile and treats you with respect. That smashes through the cognitive spam filter. The person behind the counter doesn't look up and smile and basically lets you know how unhappy he or she is. Well, that also smashes through and sends a complete and total story about the brand. So the recommendation or the advice on all of this is, how do we think about all those touch points? Rather than trying to buy one big ad campaign and drive someone all the way through their entire journey until they see some shitty banner ad that says, click here and buy now, map the consumer journey. I'm not talking about beer and bubble gum. Like, I'm not an expert in that. But if you're talking about sizable purchases, cars, motorcycles, vacations, B2B software, financial services, people go on a multi-hour journey. And if they see your TV ad 3 times, 6 times, 9 times, 12 times, multiply that by 30 seconds, that still leaves 99%. 99% of the consumer journey is untouched. And since most brands are still focused on traditional media, that means we can differentiate and we can create mathematical leverage simply by understanding each of those individual moments. And that is how these incredible brands are built. That's how they are now worth billions of dollars in brand equity, more than the aforementioned GDP of major nations, simply by smashing through the cognitive spam filter with valuable content and valuable experiences. And bringing it all the way back to where the question started with Apple, that's all they did. Like, the retail experience in computers 30 years ago was dog shit. Totally undifferentiated, nasty boxes everywhere. And they just reimagined it. But they didn't say we need to be in retail so that we can own the channel. They said, let's reimagine it so we can create a valuable experience. They continue to do it today, as do some of the biggest and the best brands in the world.
Yeah, no, I really love that. I think somewhere in the book, I had a quote that, your brand is basically supposed to be a shortcut to a feeling. Like,
Yeah.
if I think of Nike, I should get a feeling, and I should also have an association of like, okay, I know Nike does XYZ. I know they've got these shoes. I know they support these values. Oh, but there's there's a little bit of hoopla around, manufacturing in China and some of the things that come with that and the supply chain. So we're all building those, we're building brands for that moment where a consumer comes in contact with you, and we want them to have a positive feeling and then go deeper.
100%. Look, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and there's more ways to do it than this. But the way I think I figured out how to articulate it is to create these content and experiences that fit in 3 buckets: inspiration, education, and information. In the world of marketing and advertising, and it's true of capitalism, what we're actually doing in life is we're trying to help people become a bolder, better, happier version of themselves. It's why capitalism exists. It's why people buy products. But the same thing is true of marketing and advertising. Help people envision a better version of themselves. So when you go back through the history of advertising and the great brands out there, Nike being an obvious example, here's to the crazy ones with Apple, inspiration has always been core to it. That remains true. But there's two other buckets. The second one is education, which is as people go through their journey of life in your category, not just with your brand relationship, how do we educate them? Apple, going back to your question and example, it helps educate people how to be more creative, how to actually use some of these tools that they have, whether it's video editing, music software, communication in general. Nike is now starting to invest in apps, in the ability to help people, whether or not they're wearing Nike sneakers, become more physically fit. They've got a training app, which is incredible. And then the third bucket is information, which sounds so grossly obvious, but it's totally ignored by so many brands, which is help people understand how to invest their hard-earned dollars more wisely. Tell us about the features and the functionality of this product. So for example, Cotopaxi is a brand that I've spent a little time studying recently.
Mm-hmm.
They've got this incredible differentiated story. The products are different. They're more colorful. They're more unique. Like so many of these brands look very similar. Cotopaxi looks unique. It's differentiated. And it's somewhere in their content, in their information, they're inspiring people to enjoy the great outdoors and enjoy their uniquely colorful products. But the thing that caught my eye and really excited me the other day is I saw a piece of content on their website, which was explaining the features and the functionality that made their backpack different and better than the competition. So at some point, I'm exposed to that brand. I'm excited about that brand. I want to check out that brand. But later, when I've already gone through my experience with them on social media, then I go to their website. I'm on the homepage. I go to the index page. I'm finally at the product page. Well, dude, if you want my $100 or whatever it is, tell me what I'm getting. Because otherwise, you're not going to flip me over. I might tell my friends about Cotopaxi. I might be stoked about Cotopaxi, but it doesn't mean I'm going to buy, right? We need a commerce-oriented goal. So at the end of the day, sometimes it's just about information. I thought this content was actually really cool, but it wasn't going to win any awards. It wasn't emotional. It just showed me what made this product different and better than the competition. So ultimately, in summary, it's about inspiring the audience and then sequentially educating the audience and then sequentially informing the audience. That's how we carry people through their journey instead of just interrupting their journey.
Yeah, I love that. And now with data, we can actually map that consumer journey so we can see like, okay, if they watch the inspirational content first, which is what most big hero ad campaigns are, right? It's celebrities and influencers, and it's meant to hype you up and get you excited and have an association with like, okay, that brand is cool. I want to be like the people that I'm seeing, or I want to feel that way. So I want to associate with them by being part of that community. And then there's the kind of educate, which is, okay, well, now that I've decided I want to go on a river rafting trip, now I've got to figure out like, what do I need and how do I get there and where do I go? And then I go to their webpage and I actually see, oh, okay, this actual, or for your rowboat, you could buy at REI. This is what it actually does and why it's better than the others. And you can essentially target people based on where they are in that content journey of what have they seen upstream and what have they been exposed to after, right?
That is the perfect summary. And where you started that summary was such a great point, which is it's about data, right? And, one of the things we have to realize right now is we don't need data. We sure as fuck don't need more data. Some absolute geniuses, and I don't know how anyone can confirm or deny this point, right? They were probably from MIT. I'm making that up. They're absolute geniuses. But they figured out that there's now more data available than grains of sand in the entire planet. Like grab a handful of sand. You can't even count that, right? Like that's how smart these folks are. And let's just say it's accurate or at least ballpark accurate. We don't need all that. Right? The question is, how do we take that data and apply that data? And you've summarized it perfectly, which is we know what they did. They interacted with that piece of content, that ad unit, whatever the case may be. They're inspired. Now what's next? They're educated. Now what's next? Let's inform them. right? Data is such a powerful tool, but we can't have paralysis by analysis. At the end of the day, it's just about identifying who you are, not your name and address and all that shit, obviously, right? Who you are and what do you want? And then what do you want next? It's that simple. Side note, let's say they don't want to interact. Let's say you create the greatest piece of content ever. It's so incredibly inspirational. And they watch a few seconds or the whole thing and they're not interested. Like, well, I guess they wouldn't watch the whole thing. The data point is you tried a few times, then they're not interacting. Great. Take them out of your audience, right? That's how you can start. Like TV was always like, oh my God, I want to sell Nikes. I want to sell beer. So what do? You're buying ESPN and you're hoping to God simply because they're sports fans, you can sell them sneakers and beer. Now we can use the data to figure out exactly who they are and what they're looking for. But if they happen to ignore us, save the money. Don't knock your head against a brick wall trying to sell them something they don't want to buy. Save those millions and millions of dollars because there's 340 million people that live in this country. Your target audience may only be 1 million or 30 million. Regardless, it's a minority of the totality of all the people out there. If they're ignoring you, ignore them. But the people who do interact with you will tell that sequential story exactly as you described it, Dylan.
Wow, that's really cool. In that, when you think about it from that context, I feel like maybe all ads should be skippable because then you're kind of sorting like, okay, here are the people who actually care and give a shit about my thing because they were willing to watch past the skip button and maybe to the end. And here are the people that said skip. They're voting out. They're opting out of wanting to be targeted by me or talk to my brand. So let's focus on the people that didn't skip.
Totally. Look, man,
Yeah.
That's one of the benefits of the Meta platform. And Google's platform does it well also, but Meta's is better if we're honest with ourselves. It's the ability to do that. It's to build a custom audience or a series of custom audiences based upon the way that they interact with content, right? For those of you that are sort of new to this, I think we've all seen and we remember, maybe it was a decade ago or so it hit and it was, I'm shopping for a pair of shoes. And then you're out like checking the weather and all of a sudden those shoes showed up in a banner ad. And at first everyone's like, holy shit, how'd that magic happen? Now that's commonplace. It's retargeting. We all know what it is. Now it's about content retargeting. We know who you are on a one-to-one basis. We know the content that you've already interacted with. We don't need to repeat it over and over and over again, which creates friction and becomes counterproductive. We can let that story change and grow, carry you through that journey, totally differentiate the brand and create value.
Yeah, I love that. So let's talk about the holy grail of non-interruptive advertising, which you've already gone ahead and done yourself, even for your personal brand, which is the branded content and or the 1 hour, 1.5 hour film. I've only ever made it to a 40-minute documentary with Adobe and Casey Neistat. I hope to one day accomplish what you were able to accomplish, but in my mind, that's the holy grail. And, not only something that's very industry specific that's living on YouTube, but also think of like brands that are able to migrate and be so good that they get onto like Netflix, right? So you've got like, the golf show on Netflix that really drove up PGA viewership. And you've got the F1 series that really paved the way for F1 racing to come into America. The content has to be good in order to get that traditional style of distribution, but you made a very good film that gets lots of views on YouTube and I'm sure the other places that it is generating audience. So do you agree that kind of the long form storytelling is the holy grail of the type of advertising you're talking about?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I've got a different visual in my mind than a holy grail. The visual that I get in my mind is an ampersand, the simple and sign that sits on everybody's keyboard. I think it's about all of the above. And I think that's why so many brands remain addicted to traditional advertising because it's an easier way to build a brand, just spend a few $1 million on a campaign, spend a few $1 million on a celebrity, and use TV to get it in front of your target audience. Spend billions and billions of dollars. Sounds pretty appealing, except for the fact that the vast majority of people just simply aren't watching those ads, right? We see data that shows that 89% of millennials aren't watching TV ads. not because they're skipping over them with a DVR. They just have a supercomputer in their pocket, right? Ads come on, they look down, they ignore them, right? 85% of ads right now, even when people see them, are proven to be ignorable. So here's the interesting point on that, Dylan, when you think about long form content. We continue to see all this data that shows our target audience has a painfully short attention span. There's this research study. I think it's valid. I've gone down to that rabbit hole and looked at it. I'm pretty sure Microsoft invested in it. And the finding from it is that human beings now have a shorter attention span than goldfish. It's something like 6 or 7 seconds. And if you look at the macro data about how people consume data, content, and stories on like social media, the breaking point tends to be about 47 seconds. Doesn't matter how good your content is, people log off on your video on social after about 47 seconds. So now there's this sort of race to the bottom where everyone's like, oh my God, I need to make shorter content. And the opening of every goddamn video needs to be so attention grabbing. And you start seeing the same techniques and the same sounds and all that crap. And then you've got your point, Dylan, which is, wait a second, but people are watching hours and hours and hours about F1 or hours and hours and hours about golf with Full Swing on Netflix. And I think the bottom line is this. Yes, people have a shorter attention span if you're not giving them the content they want. Because if you were to ask all of your friends and you were to ask yourself, like, you ever binge watch something? Fuck yeah, man. Who doesn't binge watch?
All the time.
It's awesome. It's like a little vacation for your brain. Like, oh my God, did I just lose 8 hours of my life becoming immersed in a story? Yeah, we binge watch. So how is it that we have a shorter attention span than a goldfish, yet also a longer attention span than ever before, because we wouldn't make it through an 8-hour movie back in the good old days, but now we 8 hours of binge watch? Bottom line is this: content. Make great content and you will pull people in. Make great content and it'll extend their target audience, right? So there's a different time and a different place for all these types of content. That's why I always see the ampersand. Some brands, Mattel and Barbie and F1 and the PGA, they can make long form content, and some brands can only make 6s and 7s. But the truth of the matter is, for most brands, it's a combination depending upon who's the audience, where are they in their journey, and what's the information that they're looking for.
Yeah, I love that. And it seems to me that the brands that do invest in that long tail storytelling, they become more than just a piece of content, right? You just talked about Barbie. That was the most successful product promotion campaign in the history of the earth because they were able to partner with, I think, 400 other brands for that Barbie film release. Like you saw, I remember probably the one that I was most excited about or that's most visceral in my mind was I was in New York that summer. We walked by a Zara store. It's completely pink. The outside's pink, the inside's pink, the entire store is pink in partnership with Barbie. Again, going back to that experiential component where they, showed that partnership in the real world as a manifestation of like a store takeover in an important thoroughfare like, 6th Avenue in New York or whatever. But, these long form storytelling campaigns are partnerships, they're PR. But I imagine with an hour and a half film, you can probably create 700 short form videos that you can then promote on social. You could probably create a pretty awesome ad campaign out of something like that. It seems like the investment in that hour and a half storytelling or bingeable, episodics, it becomes an asset that's above and beyond the value of just that piece of content alone. And, in the instance of Barbie, I imagine they made money off it. It's an IP generator, and that's maybe a hard example for, a brand that maybe sells telecommunications software or something like that. But I feel like every brand has an audience that they could go out and celebrate and storytell around.
100%. Look, I mean, you're bringing together a bunch of really important points that we've been talking about today. If Zara becomes pink, what are you doing at that point? You're smashing through that cognitive spam filter that we talked about earlier, right? The cognitive spam filter was there to block out the 1,000 banner ads that we see every 12.5 seconds. I'm making that up, but like there's so many paid ads that we see. And then all of a sudden you're like walking down the street and you're shopping and there's like a pink Zara and it's triggering the memory from the Mattel and Barbie. Like that smashes through the cognitive spam filter. But you also talked about B2B telecom software when I think there's a really important point there, which is this. if I were to buy a product from any of the companies that we've been talking about today, Barbie, Apple, Nike, and I make a bad purchase, what am I out?
Mm.
$100, $200, maybe $1,000? Sucks. Nobody wants to be out 100, 200, or even $1,000. That would suck. But let's say you're in charge of B2B software and you've got to buy the right software. And let's say you make the wrong purchase there. You could lose your entire career. You can lose your
Mm.
job. You can lose your
Mhm.
ability to provide healthcare and food for your family. So, what's the implication? Everything that we're talking about is actually magnified and even more important in B2B categories, which tend to be pretty shitty with their marketing and advertising when you look at the history of B2B marketing. But when you think about those three buckets of inspiration, education, and information, when you think about that strategy of mapping the consumer journey, understanding the big moments and the granular moments, not repeating the same message over and over and over again, but carrying people through their journey, it's much more powerful in B2B sales than consumer sales because the stakes are that much higher. But we continue to see these mistakes being made. I don't mean to name drop on a company that, maybe they're watching, maybe they're not. But like you think about Workday, like you look like you're probably
Mm.
a sports fan. You put on a sports event and you keep seeing these Workday ads, like be the rock star of your company. That's fine. You built a little recognition with your name. You're spending a ton of money. I don't know what the dollars are, but then what's next? Like, where you or do you think I'm going to watch that TV ad and then go buy your SaaS platform? No, I'm going to go on a journey. That journey could be a year, 2 years, certainly scores and scores and scores of hours. I'm going to be on social media. I'm going to be on content. I'm going to be on your website. I'm going to be at events. Start investing in every one of those moments, not just simply being there because the competition is there. Those are opportunities to provide value and truly differentiate.
Yeah, no, I love that. So you also talked in the book about the idea of product-led marketing, like maybe think about making your product better before you think about making your marketing, your advertising better. And you talked about how this actually shows up in the marketing. Apple, I'm just going to go back to them because they're a great example. You talked about a outdoor campaign that they did in San Francisco, and the first time you saw it, you were like very strucken by it. It was like very simple silhouette billboards that they're known for doing, and then it was like 1,000 songs in the palm of your hand or something like that. And it was really the idea that they were not even speaking much to the product itself or their brand, but really like the category and the brand promise of something new and transformative. Can you talk about that idea of product-led marketing, but also how do you leverage that in simplicity without trying to overcomplicate your message when you do roll out a traditional campaign?
Yeah, there's two components to that. So the first is I'll tell that Apple story, which is if you look back through the history of advertising, one of the most successful or at least most awarded campaigns ever was the Apple 1984 campaign. I think it was 90 seconds long. I think it only ran once. If you read the Steve Jobs biography, he loved this thing to the point that he cried about the actual ad. And if you pick up any advertising periodical now, they're still going to show all the awards and tell you how great that ad is, right? And it was like this Orwellian figure was up on the screen and this incredible athlete. She's got a hammer and she smashes through the Orwellian image. And it brings us this new definition of Apple and creativity. Here's the problem. If you go back through Apple's financials in their market share, nobody cared. Nobody gave a shit. Middle America didn't care about that campaign at all. The advertising industry cares about that campaign. Then fast forward a little while later, and I'm in the early years of this, right? And we're working on MP3 players. Younger people, they have no idea what an MP3 player is, but the bottom line is this: is it was the ability for us to get music on demand. And I'm working for all these giant companies running a ton of research and data, and they're trying to figure out, is it megahertz? Is it gigabytes? Is it frequencies, whatever? And then I'm literally, you can't make this up. I'm driving in California, going down to visit one of my clients to talk about all the research and data to try to solve this thing. And all of a sudden I see a white ad, a billboard, dead white. 1/3 is just the product. And then it just said simply 1,000 songs in your pocket. I almost crashed my car. I was looking like, oh my God, they fucking solved it. Now, for those of you who are like, who gives a shit about MP3 players? Well, that MP3 player was the iPod. The iPod morphed into the iPhone. The iPhone is now a supercomputer that sits in your pocket, and it changed the entire world around us. 1,000 songs in your pocket. What's the lesson? In the most simple terms possible, they explain what the product does. Inspiration, education, information. They nailed that third bucket of information. No bullet points, no simple, no goofy characters, no sophomoric messages. Probably not going to win any awards. But if you bought $10,000 in stock in Apple the day that ad came out, you would be a multi-millionaire today. And if you made that same investment when that 1984 campaign came out, up until the moment that 1,000 songs ad came out, didn't really do anything. That is the power of creating great frictionless marketing. Now, obviously, Apple has looked at the entire consumer journey. They've done some great ads. I happen to think that Here's to the Crazy One is one of the greatest ads ever. Inspiration followed by information. But that 1,000 songs in your pocket ad should be noted as one of the greatest ads in world history. And for the most part, it's ignored because people care about the 60-second spots, the 30-second spots, the celebrities and the goofy characters. That's what wins awards. But it doesn't drive business growth.
Yeah, no, that's such a great example. You know, a friend of mine, Jason, worked on the I'm a Mac versus a PC campaign, and that was pretty clever. And I wonder from an effectiveness component if it had a similar measurement. But
I would think so, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think
if
so.
you think about that campaign, it was the same basic concept. Simple white background, two people, no goofy characters, no sophomoric messages, no stupid songs, no bells and whistles, just a creative way. There wasn't complete absence of creativity. Like, we remember that campaign. It was certainly creative, but they removed the friction. They removed the complexity. It was just a mechanism to say, this is what our product does that's different and better than the competition.
Yeah, I love that. So, in another quote, you talked about the idea that brands are measured now based on their behavior versus their messaging. So, you know, the most clever, great ad campaign can be either neutral and or a negative for you if you don't live up to the promise of what you're saying in your marketing campaign or your advertising campaign. If you are, you know, dumping oil in the Hudson River or something like that. So can you talk a little bit about brand values and transparency? I love the example that you gave of Patagonia, where they literally went through their supply chain and just laid it all on the table. And they said, hey, look, our stuff is made from plastic. You know, we're not the best in the world, but we're trying as hard as we can. You know, love to hear a little bit about that idea of behavior versus messaging.
Yeah, I think people know the truth now, and they know it in real time. They have access to ratings and reviews. They've got access to conversations and information. And now they've got ChatGPT, which can organize all of it for you. And that's going to be as commonplace as using Google within the next 12 months. And I think the summary is people don't want to buy from shitty companies. It's that simple, right? There's too much competition. There are too many brands out there. They're always one click away. And I don't think it's the only reason why people buy, but people don't want to buy, particularly the younger generation, from brands that have shitty values and shitty behaviors, right? They were looking for brands that create value in everything that they do. The culture that they have internally, which we all can learn about on LinkedIn, the content that they create and distribute to get us interested in their brands and interested in their products, their customer service. I mean, go down that rabbit hole. Customer service is the new marketing, in my opinion. right? Like, how many times do you see an ad for a company and you're kind of interested, and then in some way, shape, or form, you interact with their customer service and it's shit. And then like their ad is like, we are customer centric. We care about you, but you don't answer the phone. Like, people get it. They're not sitting there with a calculator or a spreadsheet, but they get it. They're like, dude, you just spent all that money on the ad campaign. But then when I go to interact with you, whether it's a shitty website or shitty customer service, like there's it doesn't match up, right? There's this cognitive dissonance. So the best brands out there are getting their values straight. They're getting their behaviors straight. They're taking all of that creative firepower, instead of pointing it outward with a message that covers up the truth, instead of being opaque, they're recognizing that they're transparent, they're naked, and they're taking that creative firepower, they're turning it internally, they're fixing their behaviors, they're fixing their values. And when they've got that straight, then they can take their creative firepower and point it outward. And now advertising is about covering up shitty products and covering up shitty values and behaviors. It's actually about creating a creative and transparent lens that brings the values, behaviors, and differentiated products to life.
I love that. What do you think about AI in the customer service journey? Because I agree with you. I think customer service is probably one of the most important marketing channels that you should invest in. You know, we all remember Tony Hsieh's approach with Zappos, where it was almost over the top and it became part of the word of mouth and the viral sensation that is and was Zappos. But now AI is kind of taking over a big chunk of this. And to some degrees, AI can actually answer questions and get stuff done better than a human. Like, they have the entire LLM at their disposal, where the average service rep might not have that. Do you think there's a place for AI in delivering amazing customer service, or is it a blend?
Yeah, I don't think there's just a place for it. I think it's inevitable, and every company right now has to be investing aggressively in figuring out how AI can be used in every facet of their business. Look at the world through the lens of your audience. Look at every single major and minor moment, the questions and needs that they have, and figure out how AI can be leveraged to create value. Now, a lot of companies will do it wrong, and they're going to look at AI and be like, well, look at all the cost savings we can get. That's not what AI is for. AI is for value creation. It's not about replacing humans. It's about augmenting humans. How do we make customer service better? To your point earlier about data, how do we make data more effective so that we're less interruptive and we're more empowering? All of that can be fueled through AI. And I urge anyone who hasn't gone on their own AI journey, start doing it. Invest 20 minutes to an hour every single day. It's absolutely mind-blowing what it can do. Is some of it scary? Absolutely, it's scary. From a micro perspective, I think it's concerning what's going to happen to certain individual jobs. But from a macro perspective, there's no doubt that it's here to stay. You can't ignore it. And the real question is, how do we use it to create consumer value?
Yeah, I love that. You know, touching on the fear aspect, what I keep hearing is it's not AI that's going to take our jobs, but AI will take people's jobs that don't learn AI.
Ha! That's an absolutely perfect summary.
So, why is safe advertising invisible?
Why safe ad? That's a great question. What are the things that keep you up at night? If you're in marketing or in advertising, that's what you should be. That's what should be keeping you up at night. Are your ads invisible? And what I mean by that is, in a world where people are exposed to somewhere between 5 and 10,000 branded messages every single day, where you watch a ball game and you're exposed to dozens and dozens of ads, where you go through your digital journey of life, where you see hundreds and hundreds of ads. When you go to buy financial services, you will literally see thousands of digital ads every single year. It's more information than the human brain can process. So if you're just creating a good ad with a clear message that really looks at the history of how marketing and advertising has always been done, in a silo, it will look like a good ad. But when you look at it through the entirety of the experience that people go through, it will be invisible, because they're just exposed to way too much content, way too much information, way too much advertising. So what I don't think is that it's about risk and return. Risk is bullshit. Shouldn't need to embrace risk. I don't think it's that needed. We've got enough data out there where we can control risk. but it is absolutely about being bold. We need to be bold in the way that we think. And that can come to life in a variety of ways. But for the most part, I think it's really about stripping out complexity. How do you make those messages as clear and as bold as possible to smash through that cognitive spam filter that every human being has?
Love it. All right, Jeff, what are you most excited about the next 6 months to a year? What are you guys doing at Questus? What's going on in your personal world that you're pumped about that you can share with the audience?
For us at Questus, it always comes down to culture, right?
Mm,
I wish I could tell you about some cool new documentary that we're working on. We're probably going to start working on another book. We've got a content series I'll mention in a moment, but at the end of the day, for us, it's about culture. Like it's about acquiring the best people in the industry and giving them the processes, the tools, the environment, and the positivity and support to get them to collaborate, to enjoy their jobs as much as possible every single day. It's not the sexiest answer, but at the end of the day, what is an agency really about? Is it about AI? Is it about videos? Is it about design or copywriting? Those are components of it. But at the end of the day, a great agency or a great team, it's about talent. So what
mm.
gets me excited is about how do I acquire the best talent, and then how do I put people in position to do their best work. That's what I've learned to focus in on almost all of my time. As a matter of fact, I will say I'm not even that good at it. We've got a president, Debbie, who's fucking incredible because she's smarter than me. She's got a longer attention span than me. She's got systems and processes and tools. Like all I know is like, that's the direction we should be going in. I just don't know how to get there. So we've got an incredible leadership team, an incredible president to get us there. But I think the big lesson is in a world with unlimited access to data and technology and creativity, culture remains the ultimate competitive advantage.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, look, you're doing a great job building awareness around the agency with the things that you're doing in content marketing. It's definitely piqued my curiosity. In full transparency, I wasn't aware of your shop until I started intersecting with some of the thought leadership you put out there. So great work. You're doing a good job there. Jeff, anything else you want to point people to? Where can they find out more about the work that you're doing and get involved in the projects that you're doing, but also connect with you personally if they want to collaborate?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I mean, on your last point, we do have a new content series. We've made a documentary, wrote a couple of bestsellers, and now we're creating more short form documentaries. And the name of that content, it's called Brand Champions. So if you want to learn more about us, we're at questus.com, Questus.com. There's a link over there for Brand Champions. You can also find it up on all our social channels, but it's a lot of like what we've discussed today in a pretty creative way to educate and inform the audience in these sort of documentaries, beautiful content created by a director named Sheng-Li Huang, who I absolutely love. And I'm on the Jeff Rosenblum at Instagram. At the Jeff Rosenblum on YouTube, and our social and whatnot for Questus is at Questus Agency.
I love it, man. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. So everybody at home, wherever you're watching or listening to the show, if you enjoyed the conversation I had with Jeff today, go ahead and give us a follow or subscribe so you can tune into more episodes. And also, if you love the show, give us a review. That's how we find a larger audience organically. But if you know a marketer out there somewhere in agency world or brand marketing land, or if you know somebody who is an amazing talent that really needs to be aware of Questus and what they're doing, or in general, just think there'd be somebody who would enjoy the conversation that I had with Jeff today, don't forget to share the show. Jeff, thanks so much, man. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who's listening.